Yeah. Our event is starting. Okay, we're live. Hey, everybody.
What's going on, guys?
We are just getting set up here. This is Matt, and I'm George, and we're going to let a few more people join the live stream, and then we're going to talk all about Pearl Mini. In fact, I have another one around here, Pearl Mini for lecture capture.
Yeah, we're going to go over a couple different topics today. We're going to do a little bit of an overview, talking about the history of Epiphan and how we've typically been used in the education
How other
industry.
people are using our products in the
course.
education sector, yeah. And we've already got some people in the chat here, which is great. We've got Ryerson here. I see Bush League Baseball. Makes me curious. Cafe Obscura. So throughout the show today, jump in the chat on YouTube, and we'll answer any of your questions. We're going to save a bit of a Q&A section for the end of the show. I think that's the way we've got to set it up. We've got something, Q&A.
Rules. Yes,
Rules.
The rules should always be set up. So I think basically we're going to leave most of the questions until the end. However, there is a section that we're going to be talking about where I'm actually setting up the Pearl Mini for your lecture capture scenario. And if you guys have any questions at any point in time, feel free to stop me, pause me. George will be monitoring the chat, so we can go over in a little bit of extra detail if needed.
I might get bored at some point and want some chat to just keep things going.
It's true. That's usually the best way to go.
So if you see me tune away, that'll be your cue to know.
I'm dry and monotonous, apparently.
But this is great. We already got a bunch of people watching. Let's just see. 12 people watching. That's good. We know a lot of people have been excited for Pearl Mini to use in an education
Absolutely.
workflow, right?
Well, Pearl Mini has been mostly geared towards that kind of industry and that kind of use case. So it's been really exciting for a lot of people within the education field, within even the corporate meeting world.
Yeah.
It's like a smaller live events, conferences.
So, shall we get started?
I guess we can get started. I think enough people are here that we can build our ways. So welcome to the webinar. So today we're going to be talking about, obviously, lecture capture with Pearl Mini.
I'm George. I'm with the marketing group.
And I'm Matt. I'm with the technical support team. So today I'm going to be giving you guys the overview of Pearl Mini. We're going to talk about the sort of connections, their inputs and outputs on the back of Pearl Mini. We're going to talk about use cases that can possibly use other than just simple lecture capture as well. I'm also going to talk a little bit about features like automatically uploading files to servers or offload to a USB stick, something of that nature. And we're also going to start talking a little bit about CMS and LMS systems. That's something that you hear a lot about in terms of the industry today.
And I'm guessing you'll give people a sense of what they can do with Pearl Mini and what they can't do, because everyone's going to want to try and do everything, right?
Of course, yeah.
So we'll spend some time making sure you understand, like, what Pearl Mini is really good at. Yeah.
One step at a time. And if you guys have questions, again, feel free to clock us in at the on the comments section there on the YouTube page, on the YouTube event. And of course, if you have any questions after the fact, you maybe didn't think of during the presentation, you can always email info@epiphan.com. That'll link you to myself and to the rest of the support team, and we can answer all of your questions there.
Cool.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about Pearl Mini as a whole. So Pearl Mini is the third generation, I guess you could say, of our Pearl product line. We had the original Pearl, and then we have Pearl 2, which is our flagship product, and our new introduction, the little baby brother, the Pearl Mini. And we're not new to the lecture capture and the education and sort of education industry. Previously, with Pearl and Pearl 2, a lot of universities and educational industries and institutions have been utilizing our products. Big names such as Harvard have been known to use Pearl 2 quite frequently.
Yeah, we see it used on the really big schools like Harvard, but we also see lots of smaller schools and colleges, and I thought Saskatchewan in the sales list the other day. Lots of schools from all over seem to be using it. So.
And we have a lot of universities and college and educational institutions that are very, very excited about Pearl Mini. There's a number of out there who've already purchased quite a few handfuls of them.
Yeah.
That are starting to integrate into their classrooms, or they will be in the very near future. So let's talk a little bit about the product itself. George, you have that other unit available somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So Pearl Mini, as you can see here on the table, I've got one lit up. Lit up. I'm losing my language.
We're
here.
litting it up.
All right. So on the front is a 7-inch touchscreen. You have the availability to do things like start-stop recording, start-stop streams. You can do live switching of pre-configured layouts
on the touchscreen itself.
On the touchscreen itself. Yeah. You can access things like system status information, as well as network settings, anything on the back. On the front, you'll notice here there's a USB 3.0 port, a SD card slot, which is where your memory will typically go, and headphone jack, obviously if you want to monitor your audio. A couple of status LED lights that'll give you recording, streaming, and obviously power status to give you a little bit more information. But on the back is where we see all the interesting stuff. So you'll notice on, I guess, the one side you have the XLR and TRS audio inputs. So these are kind of cool because not only are you able to do XLR line level, but you're also able to do microphone levels for both TRS and XLR. So that's a new feature that we did
And
introduce.
phantom power.
Phantom power is a huge thing. So as an example, with the Pro Mini that we have on the table today, I have a condenser microphone that actually uses 48 volts phantom power. And from there, we'll be able to utilize a direct microphone connection. Yeah. So that's just a little condenser Audio-Technica microphone. As well as the other inputs that you'll see on here, beside those XLR TRS inputs, we have the 3.5 millimeter electret microphone input, as well as the RCA inputs. This is where you would typically find at the analog audio B section. So the XLRs are coupled as one, but they can also be uncoupled as mono. But we'll get a little more to that as we're doing a proper configuration. Besides of those audio inputs, you'll see the HDMI inputs, A and B. So you have two HDMI inputs, and then beside that you have an SDI input. And some of you guys are obviously going to ask this question. It's typically designed to handle two video sources and two encoded channels simultaneously. So if you're trying to utilize HDMI's A and B and SDI, you can, but in a very limited capacity. So
basically you don't want to be doing a lot of scaling on those sources, right?
Correct.
Trying to combine three sources.
Yeah, you ideally want to have all of them either be 1280 by 720 or 1920 by 1080. Basically all identical, no scaling of up or down scaling required for that.
Okay. And then where were you? Oh yes, you have Ethernet.
We have Ethernet, which is obviously the way you would connect a standalone device. Typically you connect it directly over a network, and then you could access it from any device on that network, or if you now have the latest firmware, you have things like AV Studios that allow you to remotely access the unit from outside the network. And then beside that, we have our USB 3.0 inputs, which can be utilized for USB drives, or it can be an external USB storage, or connected to an external server of some sort, if it's connected by USB. And then finally, of course, we have the power input on the back and the power button.
Lastly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So yeah, that's kind of the physical tour of the product. It's heavy. Heavier than it looks, I'd say. Right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. What next, Matt?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the gear and setup. So if you're doing electric capture, you've already got your Pro Mini. On the bottom, let's say you have it, there's VSA mounts which allow you to, if you want to securely, as a permanent fixture, put it onto a podium or to a wall, then you have the ability to do that. So let's say you've got your Pro Mini in the room and you want to set up a basic electric capture. Typically, you're going to need something like a camera. Usually you're going to want to have a laptop or a computer that has your slides, and some sort of audio source, either coming from a mixer board or from a direct microphone.
Okay.
So typically, a typical standard is usually have the PTZ, or PTZ if you're in Canada, camera. So we've got our Lumio 12X camera here. We typically have pointed at me for this case. We have an HDMI.
So this camera is plugged in over HDMI into this Pro here, right?
Yes, and then in HDMI B, we have the output of a laptop that's showcasing some slides, which you can easily do for picture-in-picture purposes.
If I pick that up, I'll break it, won't I?
And then, yeah, and then of course we have the microphone, in this case, the Audio-Technica, which is directly connected via XLR to the Pro Mini. So the Pro Mini currently has phantom powered enabled, which of course allows the Audio-Technica microphone to be utilized. You can kind of see the touchscreen there, which you do see a little bit of a picture-in-picture layout. So that's very cool. So you're going to want to physically connect your sources, and then from there we're going to have to do things like trying to figure out what else we might need. So you're typically a camera guy. What else would you normally need in a visual setup? Would you want something like lights?
Yeah, well, in an electric capture setting, you're probably more likely given the light.
Right.
You don't typically see people bring in their own lighting for electric capture, unless it's a smaller setting.
Right.
But of course, you want your subjects well lit. But that's standard for any kind of live event of any kind. So yeah, you've got your good as long as you've got good audio,
right,
and good video. And I find good video is easy, good audio is hard.
Right. Okay. So the other thing that we obviously want to talk about when you're doing any sort of electric capture, one thing is obviously recording your content, but maybe you want to get that content streamed over a network. If you're streaming that content over a network, and let's say you're doing a remote classroom, Maybe you're somewhere that doesn't necessarily have a corporate, very beefy, network that doesn't give you a whole lot of bandwidth to work with. What we recommend is we have kind of like these little tips and tricks that we give for bandwidth, which would typically give you to the point where you want to have your encoding bit rate will dictate the amount of bandwidth that you're going to utilize. You're going to usually want about 1.5 to 2 times the amount of bit rate or bandwidth available for your streams.
So you're saying, so right now we're streaming this program at 8 megabits up.
Yes.
And that's because we want it to look like 5, right? But we want the extra headroom, so we do 1.5 times that.
Yeah, so essentially what you're going to want to make sure that you have is enough headspace so that if for some reason...
So I never dip below.
Exactly. If it never dips below, and as well as anybody tries to access that same network, so if it's an open network as an example, and someone else decides to pick up their cell phone and start streaming as an example,
Sure, yeah.
then that's also going to utilize some of that bandwidth, giving you less space to work with. Let's say you've got an 8 megabit per second upload speed and you're using 7.5, and someone decides to start streaming, you're going to run out of space really quickly. You might run into issues where you start seeing dropped frames or the stream will stop altogether.
Right. So this is just good general advice for anybody who's doing live streaming, is that you're going to have to spend a decent amount of your time working on your network and making sure you have dedicated uplink, so that you're not sharing that uplink with friends, and you have a lot of it. So like we do this show in HD, we're streaming at 8. We sometimes do it in 4K, and we're streaming at 23.5 megabits up. So that's a big pipe that you need.
Yeah,
but
very,
in
very
a
beefy.
university or a college environment, you should be able to get that, which is great.
Absolutely. So I did see a comment really quickly. Dan Zimmer was asking if you can use USB-based webcam or cameras on Pearl Mini. Unfortunately, at the moment, it is not possible. You are limited to the hard connections of HDMI or SDI.
Well, while you're doing comments, we'll answer one more. The headphone port, David's saying it's not quite loud enough, his headphone port. Do you know if there's a capability to adjust the gain levels on the... I don't think there is.
There isn't for the headphones, no. There is just the simple settings for the headphone function on the front touchscreen, which allows you to go 25, 50, 75, 100, and then mute. If for some reason you're in an environment where the audio is just not quite loud enough, one of the things you could do is get a little bit of it's a small box, usually around $20, and it's basically a separate amp that allows you to boost that output signal from a 3.5 millimeter output.
Right.
So kind of like a little buffer in between that can give you a little extra volume from there. Now just keep in mind that when you're doing that and using a little amp, if it's a really cheap one, something like $10, $15, you might run into
It's going to sound like a $10, $15 amp? Okay.
Yeah, it's going to eventually sound like it's coming from a tin can, or you're going to get a lot of distortion out of that.
Okay, so we've got our setup. You've got your camera coming in, your mic. We've talked about the network a little bit.
Yep. The next step we have to really talk about is how you're going to configure your unit.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into our Pearl Mini. So as Pearl Mini is connected to a network, you're going to access it through a web user interface. If you're doing web user interface, typically you want to use Google Chrome or Firefox, Microsoft Edge,
So
something
basically,
of that nature.
to control this completely, we punch in the IP address that we find on the settings page here into any browser on the same network, and we have complete access, right?
Correct. So in this case, you would type in, the IP address /admin. This would prompt a username and password, and then from there you can enter the credentials, which is usually if you're the administrator, you'll just type in admin, and if there is a password, then you would enter that, and then you would reach essentially Pearl Mini's web user interface. So at a quick glance, you'll notice that I'm currently looking at from the bottom up. On the left, we see the bottom of the internal storage. So for this, we're using a 16 gig internal storage, a 16 gig SD card. You don't need to use 16 gigs. If you want to use something larger or smaller, you certainly can. If you're doing an all-day recording function, such as like 8 hours nonstop, we would recommend typically 64 gigs as a minimum. This would essentially allow you to do the 8 hours uninterrupted with 2 encoded channels at probably 1080p with a medium amount of compression without having to overwrite files, basically, because you've run out of space.
Awesome. So I noticed a lot more people have been joining the stream, so just to catch everybody up to date, what we've got going here is a Pearl Mini setup with a camera coming in, slides set up, and audio set up, and Matt's kind of going through some of the showing us the admin panel and how we can now control all these sources and some of the capabilities.
Yeah, we'll go through a little bit of a setup on how to configure your Pearl Mini in order to give you the best result for a lecture capture.
Yeah, so we'll show you how to stream, how to record, how to
set your encoding settings. If you want to offload your recorded content to a USB drive, we're going to talk about configuration presets. That's a big one. So if you're in a lecture capture industry,
Oh yeah, this is a very nice one.
yeah. So if you're in a lecture hall or something, then that unit is cemented in, and you've got 4 different courses over the course of that same day, then you have the ability of just going configuration preset. Off you go. The person just needs to pop in their story.
And will we talk about the operator control? So if I'm the
Absolutely.
educator and I just want the easy version of all of this?
Yeah, we can talk about Epiphan Live.
Cool.
All right, so if you guys already have a Pearl Mini, you guys are starting to get a little bit more familiar with the unit. So at the bottom, you'll see the info page, which will give you the status information of your channels that you have available. Firmware upgrade is obviously if there's new updates that come. We always recommend that you do your firmware updates. You know, if it addresses bugs from previous versions that might have been found, as well as introducing new features. So for this one, we introduced with the 451 the ability to remotely access the unit through AV Studio. Maintenance page, this is where you'll do things like configuration preset. So the idea with that is, on the maintenance page, you can do a section called configuration preset, where you can set whatever you like as a name, and you can have it so that it'll remember specific settings. If you want to remember all the settings you already have on your unit, let's say you wanted to create an identical configuration on a completely different Pearl Mini, you could simply just save this information. That unit will then produce a configuration preset that you can download from above, download to your computer, upload that CFG file to a new unit, and then you're all set to go. So,
or if you just want to save all your settings and constantly toggle back and forth between your, lecture room 1 setting and lecture room 2 setting, right?
Yeah. So if we could create a configuration preset that has identical settings for one, and that could be calculus, and then we could do a second configuration preset which could be for, let's say, biology, and all of those background layouts, all of the lower thirds that you might have, the specific layouts you want to do with picture-in-picture will already be set accordingly. So when you do that configuration preset load, it reboots the unit, it puts you in the state that you're ready to go. So if you're a professor, or if you're someone that's giving a lecture, you essentially can walk into the room, plug in your USB drive. If you want that content available to you after, hit the configuration preset, the unit will reboot itself, and you can hit start.
And it also means, like what you said, if I'm the IT person setting up 12 Pearl Minis across my school, I set up one, and then I could just go one to the next, to the next, to the next, and know they'll all be pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Media is a section, of course, if you want to upload content such as your backgrounds or your logos, but you can also do it as a drag and drop within a channel. I'll show you guys how to do that in a little bit. Serial port touchscreen function. So this is kind of fun. Let's say you're someone in IT, and you're setting up a whole bunch of Pearl Minis, as you were mentioning before, and you want to give the person limited amount of access so they can't accidentally stream, accidentally record, or accidentally change settings.
So I'm the professor, and I know nothing about technology, and in fact, I'm scared of it. So then you can give me set my Pearl up so I can't screw it up, basically, right?
Yeah, so if you're streaming to the same destination every time,
yes.
If your recording settings never need to change, if your configuration doesn't need to change, I can configure this by using something called single touch control.
Okay.
So single touch control can be the one touch start stop button. So this means that if I hit the start button, it'll start all recordings and all streams simultaneously. If I hit that button again, it'll stop them all simultaneously.
And you're talking about the start and stop. So it comes right up on the screen here, a big giant red button that says start.
Well, gray button says start, but stop. But
Turns red, right?
It can, yes.
And then, but it's only through the front screen, right? There's no sort of one-touch capabilities through the web UI,
At the moment, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But let's say you wanted to do that to someone, or just to that room in general. You could show it so that you're allowed to see display information. So if you want to be able to see, okay, yeah, it is actively recording. I can see a screen of myself presenting at the moment. I'll leave display and I'll show the preview, but I don't want you to be able to change any sort of network settings or configuration presets because there's only the one room, the one class.
I see.
Allow controls for recording, streaming, and switching. So this is for individual switches for each channel. I can disable that, and then I can do something like on the start screen, the single touch start stop button will be available. So once I reboot this unit, so if I were to apply these settings, the screen would temporarily flicker, come back, and if I did reboot the unit, it would automatically come up with just the big start stop button.
Sweet.
That's just great because then the professor just to walk in and goes, you're all set to go. So you can provide access and remove access to certain things. You can create a pin pad option so that you can lock down that touchscreen as well. Passwords can also be assigned accordingly. So there's 3 different types or levels of access. There's the administrator, the operator, and the viewer. So the administrator obviously has full control over the unit. The operator will have a lot of control, but it won't have every possible function. For example, they may have the option to start and stop recording, maybe not delete them. And the viewer is if you're trying to do direct access to see a stream directly, you would type in the IP address of the unit, and if you want a password protected, you'll see a username and password prompt up. They would just type in viewer as the user, type in the password that's been assigned that you may want to provide.
So for a local stream?
For a local stream, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This is great if you've got a peer that you want to jump in and see that stream locally on the network. Date and time and network settings. You can also access some of those network settings from the touchscreen as well, but you can either use DHCP or assign a static IP. There are also options for if you want to do a network diagnostic ping. So for example, if you're not sure if you're able to stream to somewhere, let's say you wanted to stream to YouTube, and for some reason you're getting an error saying it can't stream out, you may be able to come down here and go youtube.com and ping. If you get 4 packets sent, 4 packets lost, you'll understand that you have a network connection that's either not working correctly or something's blocking it from getting there. UPnP, so if you want to be able to offload some of that content to, let's say, smart TVs or set-top boxes, you can certainly do that as well. And we start getting into functions like FTP servers and external USB drive, SD cards, and everything else like that. So if you want to do automatic offload of content, let's say you've got your recordings all set in stone, you want to get them out there, whether it's to a server like an FTP server or a CIFS client, you can configure Pearl Mini to automatically do that when recordings are done, either immediately when a new recording is started or at a specific time interval every day.
So every day at the same time? I didn't realize that. I can send it, well, you could just push up all my footage to the same.
Yeah, so you can have it set so that it will offload every 6 hours or every 12 hours or once every 24 hours. Or on file rotation, which is you stop a recording, you start a new one, that old recording will immediately start pushing off.
Yeah, nice. I've noticed a bunch of comments coming in the chat here, and we will get to your comments. We're just going to work through some of the workflow around Pearl Mini, and we have a section at the end where we're going to address all these comments. So keep them coming. This is great.
So external USB drive, automatic file upload, we'll come back to that in as we start doing recordings and we finish configuring our unit. And I'll show you how it works if you want to manually move that content over to a USB drive or if you want to automatically offload it.
Okay.
SD card, pretty straightforward. When you're popping in your SD card for the first time, you're going to need to format it. Beyond that, you won't really need to touch it again. There's a quick and a full card format. Obviously, the quick format is pretty standard way to go. The full format can take a very long time depending on the size of your drive, so just be mindful of that. It might be something you want to do. If you're setting up Pearl Mini at the end of the day, you pop it in, do the full format, leave for the day, come back, you should be fine. HDMI output, so this will allow you to see content on a monitor. So if you want to have...
So this is the literal HDMI output. There's one HDMI output port on the back of this, which I can route to any other video source whatsoever. And I can choose to output a channel. So on Pearl we have channels. So it could be a combined layout or any of my sources, right?
Correct, yeah. So if you wanted to just have a monitor set up within the room or a television set up in the room just showing the slides of your presentation, or if it was outputting towards a projector or something, then you can have it set so that it'll only see the content you want to see either from the video source or from the channel itself.
And I can send it to an overflow room or something like that.
Absolutely.
If I have the cabling, of course. Yeah.
I would absolutely, I always recommend that, absolutely. Especially if you've got someone else that's controlling your show. Right?
Sure,
if you've got another operator, a producer of some sort that's able to do all that layout switching for you as an example, they might most benefit from that.
Sure.
You can also, certainly disable a lot of that content as well. So if you want to make sure that you're not seeing anything, you can certainly disable that. Again, if you want to see just an input, I have it set so it's only looking at slides.
Okay.
And then we'll start talking about our SDI sources. So SDI, HDMI, audio are relatively identical. The reason I say that is because you get an audio meter available. So if you have HDMI coming over, let's see, your slide presentation has a video, then you're going to get that audio content that's available. If for some reason you're running into a section where your mouth and the sound that's coming out of your mouth is not matching up, you can certainly adjust that accordingly, so up to plus or minus 300 milliseconds.
In fact, we do it here for this show. We noticed there was a slight delay on our camera, so we actually add a bit of delay for this show. So it's kind of required when you have a lot of equipment. If you have equipment routing through other pieces of gear within your production setup, you're going to find there's going to be a delay somewhere. So this has been a hugely helpful tool in letting us set up our live show. So.
Then we get over to the analog audio. So the analog audio, this is where you start talking about the XLRs, TRS combo jacks. We're talking about the 3.5mm inputs. So analog audio B, I'll refer to this in this case, is the RCA or the 3.5mm audio inputs. These are a kind of coupled together. So if you want to use both of them, just be mindful that the same gain is going to apply to both.
So we can apply gain to any of the inputs on any of the audio inputs on here, right?
For the analog audio, absolutely.
For the analog, so the XLRs, the TRS.
Yep. So if you want to plug in a microphone, you can add gain. If you want to plug in just an output of a mixer, you can certainly do that. If you're plugging in a 3.5mm, like the lavalier microphones, the ones you typically stick on your lapel, certainly do that as well for the 3.5mm electret microphone. But again, to keep in mind, if you're using RCA and the electret microphone, and they need different amounts of gain, you're going to run into issues.
They're coupled. Okay.
They're coupled together.
So we see Pearl Mini now being, you can get away with using Pearl without a mixer because of these kinds of capabilities.
Absolutely.
In a lot of environments, you'll have one, which is great. But if you don't have it, you're going to be okay because you have your gain control, you have your phantom power.
And we're going to get this question a little bit as well, so I'm going to cover this now. The XLR TRS inputs, although they are a stereo pair, you can uncouple them.
Yeah, that's a new addition to the Pearl firmware. It used to be that they were always a stereo pair.
Yeah.
And now you can pull them apart, which is great.
Yep. So as a default, they always come as a stereo pair, which means it's only one selectable audio source within your channel when you're selecting which audio source you want to use. But with Pearl Mini, you can uncouple them, and from there you have independently controlled, independent gain for each left or right. So the top one, input gain would be left, and then the bottom one is right.
I see.
Phantom power can only be enabled and disabled from the web user interface on this screen. Please be mindful that if you guys are planning on plugging in a mixer into the XLR inputs, those don't support phantom power, so I'd recommend to make sure it's decoupled or it's unselected before you do that.
So your mixer might explode?
A lot of the new mixers, probably not. A lot of them have that fail-safe now, but I wouldn't risk it anyways.
Sounds like a good video for us to do. The exploding mixer show.
Now we have to try and find them.
We have to find some old mixers.
Right. So you can select which microphone. So if you've got, let's say, George is a slightly quieter speaker than I am. Exactly. So if we put two separate microphones on each other, I could have less gain, he could have more gain, and it would be unaffected for each other for the overall mix. HDMI and SDI video. These is where you start looking at the video content. You'll get some general information such as what input signal is actually being seen or being registered from the device itself.
And it will just take that signal. You will not have to define what resolution it is. It will just detect what it's getting and use it. So you're not going to have to worry about trying to analyze what your video source is. You just plug it in and it'll work perfectly.
Just keep in mind, Pearl Mini in this case only goes up to 1920 by 1200. It's the maximum resolution. So if you're trying to capture the output of a 4K camera in UHD resolution, you're not going to get anything.
Can't you scale it? Automatically scale down? No, you can't. It won't.
No, it have to be scaled from the camera first before it comes into Pearl Mini.
But you can do other weird resolutions like your VGA signals and any kind of DVI content that you might have, right?
Yeah, anything between 640 by 360 up to 1920 by 1200. Down below, if there's no signal image, there's a default one just says no signal, but you can obviously upload your own content if you want as well. So you can be like, please stand by, signal will soon appear. And at the bottom, you always get a reference PNG that will update and refresh every 5 to 10 seconds. So as you can tell, this really flattering angle of mine is going to work out great for me later. As we're getting towards the top here, so recorders is a little bit of a older technology.
Well, people don't use them that often, but
typically it's not something you'll see used with Pearl Mini. But essentially, a recorder is a multi-track file. It's a combination of multiple channels, basically in one. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a lot of applications that will be able to open a multi-track file.
Yeah, I've been burned there,
VLC
trying to open up multi-track files.
Yeah, VLC is pretty much the only one who will do it. It'll open up in multiple different windows and play them all at the same time,
Yeah.
which is great as you start to panic, try to stop them all.
Yeah, you do record, so we call it recorders here, but
Yeah.
if you want to actually set up your channel for recording, Matt will show you that. It's part of the channel settings.
Yeah. So as an example here, I have two channels that I've already pre-configured. I got a program channel which will have layouts, so I can do live switching between, and then I decided I was going to do an ISO. In this case, I actually want to do slides. So I've got my slide set up here, just as an example. This will refresh about every 15 to 30 seconds.
Except it's a slide deck with one slide, so.
So yes, this single slide deck is going to be
Yeah.
very exciting. So we'll do the program channel first. So you get the info page just off the bat. So if you're trying to do a direct stream to someone within the same network, so to appear as an example, and they want to open this up within a browser or within something like VLC Media Player, you can provide them something like the RTSP link or maybe the flash stream information directly via email. They would just simply enter that into their web browser, hit enter, and if you have a password on viewer, that's where they would get the username prompt.
Okay.
So let's talk about layouts a little bit. So this is where you get to configure your channel completely. As a default, this will actually just say probably HDMI A or Auto A. You can come in here and just change the name to whatever you like, hit enter, it'll remember those settings. And I've got a couple of layouts I've already created. So I've got a picture-in-picture with a background, with a little bit of a text overlay, my slide content, and my video camera content.
So the reason you set up layouts is because you want to do switching. That's the purpose of layouts. Well,
Yes.
not just because you want to do switching, but also you want to compose any kind of media element, pretty much.
Yeah, and the fun part is with Epiphan, with Pearl 2 and Pearl Mini as an example, we don't limit you to a specific set of layouts. You have the sky is essentially
you
the
can
limit
do
for what you want to
cropping.
do. You can
Scaling
scale
no
it,
matter what. So.
You can add the custom PNGs. It does support transparent PNGs as well. So if I wanted to add a transparent logo for Epiphan video, I can certainly do that as well. And of course, you can add your text overlays, which you can change accordingly. So I've got that little picture-in-picture layout created. I've got a full screen of just my camera source. So if you guys get bored of seeing the picture-in-picture content or just the slides content, we can switch over to me. In the top right-hand corner here, I have a transparent PNG I've just thrown in there. And then, of course, I've got my full screen for slides. So this is just kind of like a typical scenario of what you would typically see within a lecture.
And within each of those layouts, you can also select which audio source you want.
Correct. So we're actually going to
marry with them.
Yeah.
Right?
So what we'll do is we'll just create one right now.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
So I'm going to add a new layout. So layout 4 is a default. I can name it whatever I like. And it always starts off as a black screen, not overly exciting.
Woo.
If you scroll down, you'll notice you have audio sources input and not much else. So if you click on Add New Item, you can select, let's say we want to do a background. So we'll go picture first. And I'm going to select my background. This has been preloaded up into Pearl. However, let's say that, I'll just add this one and remove this in a second. Let's say you wanted to add an image you have on your computer, but you haven't yet uploaded it to Pearl Mini. Please select picture or drop picture here. So you can literally drag and drop a picture from
That's really nice, actually.
my pictures or from your desktop or something of that nature directly in here and automatically load itself into Pearl Mini that you can use at a later time. So I've just gone ahead and selected the background, which I had pre-uploaded to Pearl Mini. And from there, I'm just going to pull it up to scale so that it covers the entire screen. I'm pretty happy with what I see. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's clean. I have what I need. But I need that really unflattering view of myself. So I'm going to go ahead and add a camera source. So I've got myself plugged into HDMI A, I believe. There we go.
So that's this Lumio camera
Yeah,
here.
so this
looking
Lumio
up at
camera
you.
connected to HDMI A. And in this case, I'm going to try and mirror a little bit of our configuration that we have for the webinar. I'll add another video source. In this case, I want to add our slides. So I'll add our one deck slide here. And I'm going to pull it to about, let's say there. Now here's my first problem. Now I'm stuck. So let's pull this right to the top. This will bring it back forward. And now I have that proper picture-in-picture that I'm looking for.
Now, what if you want to like crop yourself so you're just like a not taking up as much real estate.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't really need to see that
Giant
light in
light.
the background. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on the crop option, and then from there, I'll just move it so that I'm in frame. I'll press OK. I now have a new cropped image I can kind of play with. It's slightly out of the way. Now, of course, if you're going to be doing a lot of moving around, you're not going to want to crop your image too much unless you have a camera that somehow can follow you. So I've got my video sources all set up. Maybe I need a text overlay, date and time, maybe. So I'll do a date and time stamp. It comes up automatically. And then, of course, you can change settings like if you want to change the background color. Let's say I want it to be more on the red side. I'll do that.
Cool. So you can put in any string of text you want in that,
Yep.
of course, right?
Yeah, I just up here and go, you know.
Oh,
This is what happens when I stop clicking on things. George is funny. I'll save that. George is now funny.
awesome. Okay.
Now, so I've got my video all set up, and now I've got to do my audio. So right now, I remember that I have XLR from my microphone going directly to XLR2, which would be the right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and select that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to save my content. I don't have anything on here that I want. I don't have any sort of audio on slides that I have to worry about. So I'm not going to worry about utilizing HDMI B audio at any point in time.
And if you want to see a preview of this, to see what I like this snapshot, but what if
Yeah.
I want to see a live preview of this using?
I mean, there's a couple ways that you can do it. I mean, if you want to look at just the status, you can certainly do that. Oh, sorry, let me save that. You can do status, which will at least let you see.
But it's still just a snapshot. I want to see a live action preview of your mug here with this crummy camera image on you.
What would you think is the best way to do that?
Well, I would go to the live broadcast on that screen right there.
I think that's a great way of doing it.
So then you have a nice HTML5 player.
There's a little bit of latency between what you're seeing on obviously the web page and what you're going to be doing live.
Yeah.
It's going to happen with anything when you're streaming. All right, so we've done our layouts that we can now configured. Layout switching can be done either from the touchscreen. It can also be done directly from the web user interface by clicking on these. This will activate the slide that you want to use. So if I want to directly use the slide I just created, I would simply go to that.
Cool.
And now at the end, we'll talk about this beautiful Epiphan live scenario. Let's talk about encoding settings. Let's say you only need to do maybe 1280 by 720, 720p kind of streaming
Sure,
or
okay.
recording. You don't need to do anything over the top, but I've got it set to 1920 by 1080. So what you can do is you can go in here and configure all your settings. Codec is H.264 as a default. You can also do something like motion JPEG. Please be mindful, motion JPEG usually means no audio. Encoding preset settings, either hardware accelerated or software. We recommend staying on a hardware. Software is not really going to apply unless you're in a very niche use case. Something like if you're doing a lot of movement and you're only doing a lot of small camera motions, maybe you'll get some sort of artifacting on the screen, usually like green blips or something. This is where hardware accelerated may not be the most amazing thing on the planet. Typically you see it with a lot of noise and signal, so if you're trying to capture let's say like an ultrasound machine as an example. Usually a lot of signal noise. Software accelerated might be the better option.
Okay.
So let's say we just need 1280 by 720. We'll select the resolution that we want to use. Keyframe intervals, 1 second, usually pretty standard, don't really need to do any of that. 30 frames per second. I don't really need anything faster. If you're in Europe and you guys...
But I can do 60, right?
Yes. You can do 60. So if I want to do 60, let's do 60.
Nice.
Bitrate. So as a default, it's set as an auto. We usually recommend setting a static bitrate. This allows you to have more control over your signal. So it's going to help with your recording size. It's going to help with your streaming size.
What does auto do?
Auto just basically assigns whatever it believes the best value is.
Okay, so it's hard-coded.
Yep.
What we've decided is the best for 720, etc.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So if you're doing 720, you want to have moderate amount of compression while still being able to maintain quality. Let's say
5?
five would be very nice.
Okay.
So we'll go with 5. Hit enter. That's going to save those settings there for you.
Great.
And then we can enable and disable audio, select the audio settings you want to use. You have AAC, MP3, or PCM as options that are available. So I've made all my changes. I'm going to save those settings. At 5,000 kbps, I know that I'm going to be using 5 megabits per second of upload speed, right? So if I'm doing a stream and I have to worry about that limited network,
Yes.
you know, we usually recommend 1.5, but we would prefer if you had 2, so it gives you a little bit of extra space. So if you're going 2 times what you want to have at least 10 up. But if you're in a hard press situation, then 1.5 would be the easiest way to go. So let's say 7.5. So let's talk about metadata.
Oh, yes.
So that's a really fun and important thing, especially if you're in an industry, in a corporate environment or an education industry. This can apply to every single recording file you have based on this configuration. So again, if you're in a classroom that has 4 different lecture halls, you've got the same professor that's teaching every time, you've got the same information. If there's any copyright clauses or information that needs to be provided, you can certainly do that. Or if you want to just make a comment saying, you know, this is a special webinar. You know, you can apply that, and you'll always find that as information on the recorded video file after the fact.
Okay.
Streaming. Pro Mini has the option, the availability, and the potential to be able to stream to multiple destinations simultaneously.
Okay.
So if I wanted to stream to Wowza Streaming Cloud, I wanted to stream to YouTube, I wanted to stream to Facebook, StreamMonkey, or if you have an RTMP server that you want to access, either an LMS or something of that nature, you could certainly do multiple destinations at the same time, provided that you have the available bandwidth. Just think, if you're using 5,000 kbps times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you got to make sure you have the 25 plus all that extra buffer.
Okay.
So you have a number of streaming protocols that are available to you. You can do things like RTMP push, RTSP announce. Obviously, we have some preloaded ones as well, like Original Live Stream or Wowza Streaming Cloud, to make your lives a little bit easier. But let's say you want to stream to, let's say, YouTube. So you create an RTMP push. You would enter or copy and paste the URL for that. So it'd be like a.youtube.com/RTMP, and then enter the stream key value and click apply. Once all the information has been set, you'll have a start button that becomes loaded up, which you can hit start, so automatically start pushing the content over to
So we can
YouTube.
start streaming from here. We can start streaming from the front screen.
Touch screen.
And there's another control UI, which we'll dive into a little bit later.
Yeah, that'll be Epiphan live.
Yeah.
And then if you decide you want to do more than that, so you've got, stream 1 is YouTube, stream 2 might be to Wowza Streaming Cloud, so you load that information, and then maybe you want stream 3 to be, let's say, Facebook, just for the sake of argument. Right,
Okay.
so I've got 3 streams that I'm just going to configure the credentials and then hit apply, and then I can start all of them simultaneously or
And stop
independently
them
from
all
each other.
at the same time, right?
And that'll give you that little bit of extra control. So either if you want to do them independently from the web user interface, you can do it here.
Okay.
You can select a specific channel and do that, or you can do all of them at the same time.
Recording.
This is the fun stuff. So, as a default, MP4 files are the type, but you can also change that. So if you click on the change icon, you'll notice things like you can set a time limit or a file size limit as well. So if you want to keep your files in a more manageable format, or as well as change the file type. So you can do AVI, MkII, MOV, or the MP4 segments.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of AVI, but that's just more of a personal preference thing. So I'm going to go ahead and
Clearly
change
you're
it.
not a Mac user.
No, clearly I'm not. Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
So fun
I'm
things.
outnumbered.
Yeah. All right. So things for file size limit or for time limits. Pro Mini will be able to do seamless recording. So let's say you set a file size limit of 2 gigabytes, and you're doing a conversation piece. You're doing a lecture, and for some reason that 2 gigabytes file size comes really quickly. Let's say you hit or you set a really high bit rate. So 2 gigabytes comes in 10 minutes.
Sure.
When that recording hits that 2 gigabyte file size, it simply cuts that recording and seamlessly starts a new one. So if you were to play a bunch of those recording files back to back, you wouldn't actually be able to tell where one stopped.
No, I did it
and one
yesterday. I
started.
stitched together a show we did last week where I took 4 files, put them end to end, and they were all perfect.
Yeah, I believe it's like a single frame loss between 1 and 2.
Okay, yeah.
So it's pretty great. So you never have to worry about that. Now let's say you've got a 16 gig card, SD card in your unit, and you're at 15 gigs. If your limit is reached, you reach that 16 gig size, it'll automatically start overriding the oldest file.
So it's just a constant loop
Constant loop.
of recording.
So you never have to worry about, oh God, what if I run out of space? You just worry about, oh God, did I actually transfer that video file?
Yeah.
That becomes the new concern.
Yes.
This is where you can do things like automatic file upload. You can offload that content to a USB drive or to an external storage or to a server or something of that nature.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a automatic file upload, but I'm going to do it to let's do a manual one to USB, and then we'll do automatic stuff as well.
Is that where the USB stuck in the back of
Yeah.
this device?
So in the back of the unit, I've got a USB stick already plugged and ready to go. You can also use the one on the front.
Can I pull it out?
Yep, you can absolutely pull it out. All right, so just a simple USB 3 drive. You can use USB 2, just takes a little bit longer for that information to get transferred over.
Okay. There you go.
And of course, the rule of USB is it'll never go in until you actually look at it, right?
Yeah, it's the third time.
The third time is the charm, yeah. So we're gonna start by just being able to do automatic or manual transfer of files to USB. So we're gonna go external USB drive. As a default, it's set to ignored because there's typically nothing connected to it. But we're gonna go ahead and say use to manually move and copy selected files via the web interface. I'll apply those settings. And if I head back up to our little program here and to our recordings, we should be able to select that and say copy selected to external drive or move the selected external drive. So the copy means it'll still be there on your Pro Mini. Move means it's going to remove it right off Pro Mini when it's all said and done. So advantages and disadvantages to that, you have a fail-safe in case it's corrupted during the transfer.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're freeing up space from Pro Mini if you decide just to move it rather than copy it. But let's say you don't want to have to manually do this every time because you're a busy person and you have a life. You can do things like automatic file upload. So what we can do is we can enable this. We call it AFU for short. So there's a few things you have to configure for automatic file upload. So the first thing is you're going to have to configure the channel so that it'll allow you to do that. So it'll say things like this at the beginning. Automatic file upload is not enabled for this device. That's okay, we're going to fix that. So I'm going to click apply. Then I'm going to go to the external USB drive section, and I'm going to change that to the last option at the bottom, which is use automatically move and copy recorded files via automatic file upload. I'm going to click apply. Eventually it'll stop yelling at me when I get to automatic file upload. We're going to enable automatic file upload, and we're going to have it set so that it offloads that content directly to an external USB drive. As you can tell before I click anywhere else, you have other options available. So you don't have to do just a USB drive. You have FTP clients, rsync, CIFS, SCP.
Yeah.
I did see a question earlier, which I'm going to answer now just because I saw it in brief. Someone was asking if it was possible to upload automatically to Google Drive. Not directly, not as of yet. The only workaround I can possibly think of at this point would be to offload that content automatically to, let's say, a server, and then, let's say, a folder within that server, and then that folder would be linked directly to Google Drive. So it'd be more like a public access scenario.
Okay. So we've got through our handling of the files. We've got about 15 minutes left of the show.
Yep.
So let's make sure we get through everything.
Sure.
So that we have a little bit of time at the end. We're going to answer questions at the end. So put them into the chat. I'll make sure I pour over this, and we'll get to everything.
All right, so let's talk about Epiphan Live really quickly, and then we'll move on to our last segment here.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so Epiphan Live is an extension of the web user interface. It's kind of like the operator's version of the web user interface. So what it'll do is it'll open another instance of Epiphan Live, or the web user interface, and you'll basically get this dashboard. In this dashboard, you're able to select specific channels or information or video sources you want to see so that you can reference them. So I want to be able to see maybe that channel that I've created, so I know that I have my little wonky little layout with that really interesting crop. I want to be able to see things like maybe just my camera, so I know what I'm staring at all times, and then maybe I just need some information on Pro Mini. So I'm going to click on information. So this is going to tell me, how much storage is available, what my CPU load is currently, if I have anything that's currently getting ready to go to automatic file upload. And I'm pretty happy with what I see. So as an operator, it's fine.
Yeah.
But let's say I want to do live switching. We talked about before that you can do live switching from the touchscreen, that you can do live switching from the web user interface. But Epiphan Live, which is also very mobile device friendly.
Well, people really like it on a tablet. That's
Yep.
kind of when we designed it, it was really designed for the person we thought, they just want basic controls and monitoring.
Yep.
So
if you want to do it from a cell phone or from a tablet, you have the ability to do that. One of the things we made sure that we did was you can certainly see your audio meters. So you'll notice in the top left-hand corner here with the George's Funny one, that you'll see audio meters in the bottom left-hand corner. So you'll be able to see your audio as it's going through, but you won't be able to hear it. Now the main reason for that is if you happen to be the operator and the presenter simultaneously, the last thing you want is the audio leaving your tablet or your phone, looping back into your microphone to this endless feedback loop.
Which happens to us most times we do a live show.
Yep. So let's say you want to just do live switching. So you click on your menu option, click on switcher, and then you have options from there. At the top, you'll have a drop-down menu available for any configured channels that would have layouts. So in this case, we only have the one.
Right.
So we'll click on program, and at the bottom, it'll present all of the available layouts that you've created.
Cool.
On the right, obviously, is what's live, and then you can obviously preview what is happening. So I want to go switch to my camera view. I'm going to click on the switch button. It's going to take a second or two to refresh before it starts going live on Epiphan Live. However, it happened within a fraction of a second live.
So you don't get the feedback that it's live, but it's actually happening.
Correct. So the minute you click switch, it's already happened like 0.2 seconds.
So it's really snappy.
It's very quick.
Okay, great.
So that's basically the quickest overview I can give you of the Epiphan Live. If you guys have any other questions for that, certainly we can start taking those now.
Well, and just to talk a little bit more about the front screen capabilities. So Matt's demonstrating everything that we can do using the web UI and Epiphan Live, but you can do quite a bit of that from the front screen. You can start and stop your recordings. You can monitor all your channels and all your layouts. Like, you're not going to dive in and edit your layouts on there, but you can see basic system status and networking and stuff. So we see a lot of people who use Pro Mini primarily from the touchscreen. That's what we're doing today for this show. We have Jara, our operator, back here doing some switching and basic controls for the show. So you don't always have to dive deep into this web UI, but if you need to and do any kind of advanced configuration, it's there for you. So that's kind of the idea. Yeah, you want some questions?
I would love some questions.
Okay. So we have Dan Zimmer asking about the USB ports, if they're available for the cameras and mics. I think
we did already answer that.
Yeah, so basically, no, they're not.
It doesn't mean it's not possible for the future, but as we optimize the firmware and see what we can do
you were not the first person, Dan, to make that suggestion. So I also have that suggestion because we would like to be able to bring in USB cams into this. Can you stream, sorry, this is at Melon6424. Can you stream internally on a multicast-enabled network simultaneously with an external stream? Do you know, what is a multicast-enabled network?
Think of it as a network that redistributes a single stream. So basically you're offloading that single stream to another server unit that's basically going to redistribute that accordingly.
Oh, okay, so you could totally stream to that and do a separate stream as well.
Yep, it depends. Largely it depends on your available bandwidth. It also depends on your CPU load on Pearl Mini.
If you're not too much, it's
yeah. So as a rule of thumb, you guys will see that a little bit. You can see that system status information from the touchscreen as well as obviously in the web user interface or on Epiphan Live. But we should try not to hit higher than 70%. After that, you start getting a little bit closer to a little bit of a dicier situation. So if you're using 60 or 30 FPS, you might start seeing drops in frames. Instead of seeing 30, you might see 25 or 27. Well, it'll be a little less consistent.
We have Bush League Baseball asking us, can you capture to a network location? So you cannot capture to a network location. You're going to capture on the device itself, but you can transfer it immediately.
Yes.
Using automatic file upload, you can transfer it to any network location. So.
Yeah, but if the question is something like, can I use an IP camera as a video source? Unfortunately, it's not currently possible with Pro Mini. It's something we're obviously investigating at all the time. So the development team is looking at ways of optimizing Pearl Mini in order to make it more efficient so that we can do some of these things. At the moment, no, it's not possible.
Bush League Baseball is also asking what format is the captured file. We talked about that a little bit.
Yep.
MP4 is the default.
Is the default. You can do AVI, MOV, MkII, and MP4 fragmented as well.
Yeah. Fareed is mentioning we have a noticeable delay between the live event and the image on the Pearl screen. Is there a way to reduce that? So I guess what you're talking about, Fareed, is the latency. And Pearl Mini is somewhat agnostic towards the latency. We push out the stream as fast as we can, and it depends on how long it takes your CDN. So today's show we're doing on YouTube, and I think it's probably 5 to 10 seconds of actual delay.
It also depends.
And different CDNs have different amounts of latency. So if you want something that's a little snappier, if you want the fastest, lowest latency stream you can get, you can shop around for that. And in fact, I know YouTube has a low latency mode, which you can experiment with as well. So basically, you have to look at the CDNs to decide how to get the most least amount of latency.
Yeah, it also depends a little bit on your network as well and what's available,
Yeah.
how much congestion is on there. With YouTube and its peak times, I have seen anywhere from 4 to 90 seconds of delay. So just be mindful of that. And that's nothing within our control.
Yeah. So this is a question I kind of brought up earlier. What Devin Rosa is asking: how does Pearl Mini work with 2 cameras and a PowerPoint? If streaming only one channel, can it work okay? So what are the limitations? Can I do 2 cameras and a PowerPoint in one channel?
You can if there was no scaling, and if there was like a limited amount of configuration. So let's say, in this case, you had 2 cameras, both of them were 1920 by 1080. Mm-hmm. You're using the output from a laptop, which is also conveniently 1920 by 1080, and you have maybe 4 layouts, 3 full sizes of each, and then maybe a picture-in-picture.
So, and what you say is, like, it's always going to work, but you're going to see degradation. You're going to see frame dropping at some point. So if you try and do too much, that's what will happen. You'll still be able to stream, you'll still be able to record on the device, but you're not going to be happy with the quality if you suddenly drop from 30 frames per second down to 12 because you're trying to do too much. So that's the repercussion we're talking about, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Danny Lambrex is asking us, plans to offload to Google Drive in a future firmware release.
So that was the question that I was answering earlier. So
Yeah, okay.
It is certainly something that we're constantly investigating. But as I mentioned, the only workaround at the moment would be offloading to, let's say, an FTP server, and then having that server have a shared folder that's available on Google Drive.
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask for that, Danny, so who knows, it's probably in our roadmap somewhere, I'm sure.
Yep.
Cafe Obscura is asking how to select the slides if you have more slides. So to be clear, we're not controlling the slides in any way. We're bringing the slides in as a video source. So for example, if this laptop here is running slides on it, I'm controlling my slides from my laptop. You could do a workaround and upload each slide as an individual JPEG and do switching on Pearl with that. But you're thinking you want to have control of your deck,
Yep.
in which case you just control it on your host computer.
Now, if you want to do that workaround where you're uploading each individual slide, just keep in mind that the more slides you add, the higher the CPU load, the more it's going to affect your performance long term.
That's the end of our chat questions. But we're going to be here for a few more minutes. If you've got more questions, put them in the chat. We also should tell people that we go live every Thursday from this studio most often.
We do.
And the show is called Live at Epiphan. So tune in. We'll be here this week. And we talk about cameras. And, oh yeah, Jared's pointing out a point. We didn't really talk very much about CDNs or LMSs, so you could talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, I did actually want to talk about that. So obviously, if you're within a learning environment, you're going to hear the words CMS and LMS a little bit, at the very least. This we're talking referred to is content management system or a learning management system. There's also a few other options that are out there. There's a kind of like a mix between the two, which is also known as an LCMS, so it's a learning content management system, just to get more
just
complex.
To make things more complex.
So let's
decided to merge the two into one monster of a CMS, LMS, CDN.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the differences are. So I believe I have a slide somewhere that's been posted up there. I was just kind of showing a little bit between the CMS, LCMS, and a LMS. Essentially, let's say you're looking to offload recorded content, so AFU, directly to a CMS or an LMS system. Basically, you have the ability to do that with automatic file upload if it's going through an FTP server or CIFS client or something of that nature, getting to that ultimate destination where you're trying to go. But let's maybe just try to define a little bit what a CMS and an LMS and an LCMS is. Now, before I go any further, the next couple of slides that we have posted, so this content management comparison and the one that will follow will be available afterwards. We'll make the content available for you if you guys want to be able to read that and look up that content. So let's talk about a CMS. So basically, it's a system that allows you to create and publish and organize video, images, slides, and copy other content. So if you want to add like files or something of that nature, you can certainly use that. It's an open source type of system that is not only used in lecture capture environments, but also in corporate events, to certainly different enterprises and different companies. There's a lot of them out there. Some of the bigger ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So CMSs like Kaltura or Panopto.
Yeah, we have a comment here about Panopto. So I know we get a lot of questions about CMSs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. An LMS, on the other hand, is a little bit more of the administrator and, kind of like assigns the learning courses. So you kind of have a way that you can kind of track and manage the learning and the progress of the students. So it's a little bit more of like being able to handle more for the administrative of the learning courses versus creating the content. And then there's kind of like a mix of the two, which is known as the LCMS, which just kind of brings the best of both worlds, more geared towards the learning industry. Which is also really cool because then you have the ability to do things like create the content and then manage it accordingly within an education industry or platform. That's more of the big side. So if you guys are curious to know what an LCMS is compared to an LMS, we also have another slide that we'll make available. We can just pop that up on the screen really quickly. That'll just give you a little bit of comparison of whether it's learners collaboration or competency mapping, whether you can create content or not, organize and reuse some of that content, and so on and so forth. So we'll make that content available to you guys as well, so you can kind of identify a little bit more the differences between the two. Now, some of the bigger reasons why I'm also bringing this up is, although there's no direct integration at the moment between Pearl Mini or some of our other Pearl family products, the only available option at the moment would be offload that recorded content to a CMS or an LMS system. By end of Q4, we're looking to already have some direct integration within.
Yeah, we'll have some
CMS
scheduling and LMS integration or CMS integration at that point.
Yeah, and as we get closer to that date, and as the information and the new firmwares and stuff get more finalized, we'll be able to provide more information. That may come in the form of another webinar, or it might come in the form of an Epiphan live show.
We have a comment here from David Langson asking us if there's a more advanced webcast. So, David, I'm curious, what do you want to know about, and we'll publish that content. Well, I'll tell you two things. We're going to be putting a little more effort into promoting lecture capture and just diving into it and understanding it for our own sake and for yours. So look for more content this fall on the subject. You can also book a custom demo with one of our support specialists. Ta-da! And they can walk over Pearl Mini with you in a personal, like over the phone kind of way, where you can ask any questions you might have about it and try to understand it, so how it fits you. So
yeah, and the more you can provide us with your desired use case, the more we can fine tune that process for you and with you. So we can make sure we get all the information ahead of time. We can ask all the right questions with the developers and engineers, as well as the marketing team, to make sure that all the information is correct. Especially if it's something that it's not quite there yet, but it's on the way.
Yeah. So that about wraps it up. Thanks, man. Good job.
No problem.
This was we were really down to the wire getting the show set up today, so thanks for everybody for watching. Oh, there was one more comment about the chat. Someone asked how we got the chat. I'm guessing you're watching it on our website. This was from Bush League Baseball. How are you using it to manage your chat? We have a YouTube live video, and we have a chat beside it, and we can embed both of those on our website. So that's how we do that.
Makes a lot of fun. If you guys do watch the live show, we'll also have that posted up on Facebook. For the Thursday at 3 p.m.
So thanks for everybody for tuning in. We will make this a public video in a little while, and you'll be able to watch it on YouTube. And let us know if you'd like to talk about anything else, and we'll be back, I don't know, soon.
And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, after the fact, info@epiphan.com is a great place to send us your questions. And either myself, George, or the rest of the support team will be able to assist you with that.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.